The world is likely to temporarily reach 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming within 20 years, even with strong cuts in greenhouse gas emissions. The finding comes from a landmark report on climate change published by the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. In this video, we will discuss the different scenarios the world could face, their impacts, and why it is essential to avoid going over the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold. The report highlighted various scenarios for the future of the world. In the IPCC's most optimistic scenario, it describes a world where global CO2 emissions are cut to net zero around 2050. Countries around the world switch to more sustainable practices, with focus shifting from economic growth to overall well-being. There are more investments made in education, and health increases, and inequality falls. Extreme weather is more common, but the world has been able to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. This first scenario is the only one that meets the Paris Agreement's goal of keeping global warming to around 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial temperatures, with warming hitting 1.5 degrees Celsius and then dipping back down and stabilizing around 1.4. The next scenario is the next best case one. Global CO2 emissions are cut severally, but not as fast, and reach net zero after 2050. As in the first scenario, there is still a shift in society towards sustainability, but temperatures stabilize around 1.8 degrees Celsius higher by the end of the century. The third scenario is a middle-of-the-road one. CO2 emissions hover around current levels before starting to fall mid-centuries, but they do not reach net zero by the year 2100. Social and economic factors follow their historic trends with no notable shifts, as progress towards sustainability is slow. In this scenario, temperatures rise 2.7 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. In the fourth scenario, emissions and temperatures rise steadily and CO2 emissions roughly double from current levels by 2100. There is increased competition between countries, with a stronger shift towards national security and ensuring strong food supplies. By the end of the century, the report expects in this scenario temperatures to have risen by 3.6 degrees Celsius. And the last scenario is the worst case one, with current CO2 emission levels roughly doubling by 2050. The global economy grows very quickly, but this growth is fueled by exploiting fossil fuels. By 2100, the average global temperature is at 4.4 degrees Celsius higher. Having seen the various different scenarios the world could go through, let's look at why the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold is so important. The 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold is now seen as the point beyond which the worst impacts of climate change will be felt. This level of heating would still result in increasing heat waves, more intense storms, and more serious droughts and floods, but would represent a much smaller risk than 2 degrees Celsius. When the Paris Agreement was negotiated in 2015, there was a successful push by nations such as low-lying islands to include the 1.5 degrees Celsius target in the deal. In May, the G7 group of nations pledged to limit the warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius in a shift from the 2015 Paris Accord, which headlined the goal of keeping temperatures at well below 2 degrees Celsius. Following this report, Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, called for an end to new coal plants and to new fossil fuel exploration and development, and it also said that governments, investors, and businesses should pour all their efforts into a low-carbon future. He stated this report must sound a death knell for coal and fossil fuels before they destroy our planet. The release of this report comes less than 3 months before a key climate summit in Glasgow known as COP26. The summit has been billed as the last best chance of keeping global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. The report will increase pressure on governments to provide clear action plans for how they will cut their nation's emissions in the next decade and beyond. This report will be followed next year by 2 further installments. Part 2 will focus on the impacts of the climate crisis, and the third will detail the potential solutions. Its findings will hopefully shape the discussions at COP26, which will then impact the markets and the direction the world opts to take.